This is the story of last spring when I went on a trip with some friends. I was a senior in college during this time, and spring break came in March. My friend group that was going was the three other girls that I lived in, a house with at school, and one other. We planned the trip all the way back at the beginning of the school year. We were going to Miami, Florida, which is a popular destination for spring break. There's a good city and beach there, so we were planning to have some fun activities. It was also very cold at the university for us, so we were going to a very warm place in Miami. When spring break came, we all boarded a flight and arrived in Miami on Friday evening. The five of us had rented an Airbnb together, which was pretty nice. It was a 3-bedroom house that wasn't that large, but plenty of space for use. It was in a good location, but we saved some money by booking it early. It wasn't too bad because we split the cost 5 ways. We were staying for a total off of days there. The first couple of days went as expected. We went to the beach a lot and some restaurants and bars nearby, as well as some other places. There were lots of places that we could go pretty close by. Many were within walking distance, or else we would take Ubers or public transportation. Some of the time we would split up a bit, but usually all of us did stuff together now. On, I believe, the 3rd night, we had been out until maybe 10 again or so. Then we all went back to the Airbnb. We had been out since pretty early in the day and most of us were tired. However, I wasn't. I was pretty hungry. I wanted to go and get some snacks. I asked anyone if they wanted to come with, but everybody declined. One of my friends did offer to come but didn't want to get any, so I said it was fine. I left the Airbnb by myself and started walking towards the street with a lot of places on it. It would take only about 10 minutes to walk to a convenience store. I just had to go back a block or two and then take a left. Then I started walking along the street. Now this street had hotels, restaurants, and some stores on it by. Now it wasn't as busy anymore, but there were still cars driving by here and there, and some people walking. I was walking along the sidewalk looking for a convenience store or something. I was sure that I'd seen one before, but I couldn't remember exactly quite where it was. So, not long at all. After I started walking on this sidewalk, a car came driving up. I had heard it coming up from behind me, but it seemed to slow down right as it was passing. Then the car pulled over about 10 feet in front of me on the side of the road. I thought it was probably an Uber dropping somebody off or something. The car was a black Cadillac sedan. I remember after coming to the side of the road. I remember seeing the front passenger side window rolled down. That was the window that was closest to me. The other windows were pretty tinted, and right when I was almost even with the front passenger side window that was rolled down, I heard a voice. The guy driving called out to me and asked me if I needed a ride. I didn't, and I looked over and said, "No, thanks." The guy driving was wearing sunglasses, and then he told me to hop in. I said not thanks once more, and then just kept walking. Then I watched the car pull away from the spot I found this situation. Sort of weird. What made this guy think that I was going to get into his car with him? I had no clue who he was. The car drove away down the street after that, and I kept on walking. Probably less than 5 minutes later, I was still walking on that same sidewalk. Then I heard a car approaching from behind again. I thought nothing of it until I heard it slowing down. When it passed me by, I saw that it was the same Cadillac. This got me a little worried once more. It pulled over a little bit in front of me on the side of the street. When it did, I kind of moved to the right a little to be farther away after the car stopped, though this time the back door opened. When it did, I saw a man step out. The guy started immediately walking towards him, and nobody said anything. And I started walking away from him. I looked around, and nobody else was in the immediate area. I actually started running and found, basically, the closest building that was open. It was some kind of restaurant, and I ran for the door and went inside of it after making it inside. I looked back out. The guy did not follow me to the door, but I saw him walking down the sidewalk just past. Then he turned around and started walking back. He stayed just inside in the small lobby of the restaurant. I watched the guy walk around the sidewalk for like a minute, then returned to the car when the car drove away. Once again, I finally left. I walked really fast to the convenience store, which luckily wasn't that far away. I stayed in there for a long time, just in case the car came back around again. Then I walked back as fast as I could. Luckily, I didn't see the man again. After, the rest of the trip was fine, but I was always more careful to look around after that experience. During spring break of my senior year of high school, I went on a trip to the beach with my group of friends. My best friend Tyler went too. His dad just bought a condo right on the beach, but he hadn't set it up to rent it out yet. So he let us party in it for a few days as long as we didn't wreck the place. Nothing sounded better than multiple nights of living completely carefree and hanging out with just the people. I liked especially since there were girls involved, even if the place was a little bare bones, and some of us would end up sleeping on couches or air mattresses. That didn't matter so much, because of course we all pitched on a couple of bottles and a few cases of beer, which we would be passing around the whole time. Tyler was initially apprehensive about having alcohol inside the condo, as he was worried about getting caught by his dad and not being allowed to party there ever again. Everybody convinced him it wasn't a big deal though, and to make it more tempting, since it was his condo, we let him drink as much as he wanted without having to pay his share. Admittedly, that was not a great idea, because for being the one who was nervous about it, Tyler drank more than any of us. Some of the guys gave him flack for it and said he was taking advantage of the fact that he didn't have to buy any. But then it was already too late, because a new kind of toddler was unleashed, and he was just knocking back the drinks. I was his best friend, which made me feel like I had to keep up with him. None of us were experienced shrinkers, so there were no thought about anyone staying at all sober to take care of their stuff. Us by the time the sun set on the first evening, we were all wasted. The hours dragged on. The music kept blasting and there were games played. Some people got sick and some people were caught getting it on. But after a while, things started to die down. There was a point at which we were all winding down and all sitting around the living room not really talking or doing anything. That's when Tyler jumped up out of nowhere and made a bunch of noise, trying to get us all hyped again. He kept saying stuff like, "It's only midnight, you quitters. The night is still young," and he was walking around to everybody, handing them drinks, all while he was slimming beers. See, we were all pretty tired, so we didn't exactly respond to it until he had a different idea. "Hey, everyone, let's go to the beach," he shouted at the top of his lungs. I can hear those words ringing through my head to this day. It was such a bad idea still, and I don't know why. But as soon as he said it, we all agreed instantly and shot up to party again. We didn't want to get more drunk, just to keep sitting around. But we were definitely down for something else to do. There was a brief moment where one of us mentioned that it was the middle of the night, and nobody was supposed to go to the beach around. Then that was answered with enthusiasm instead of deterring us. It was going to be so cool to have the beach to ourselves and be there at the wrong time of the day. There were so many of us together. What could go wrong? We killed the first bottle right then and there, and we each slammed another beer or two before heading out. We hadn't even changed out of our clothes into our bathing suits. It seemed like it was the perfect happenstance, too, that the beach was right on our doorstep. We didn't even have to cross a single street to get there. That was the most dangerous part about being a bunch of drunk fools in the dark. I figured, so it was fine. Tyler was on a roll with the suggestions and said we should all go skinny dipping again. We all thought that was very exciting. Everybody had at least one other person there that they wanted to see naked. So it was a shame that it was a new moon, and we could barely see anything that made it less nerve-wracking though. So even if you were self-conscious, you couldn't get out of it really. Then just like that, we all took off what little clothes we were wearing and left them in the sand before charging into the water. It was surprisingly cold for mid-March, but we were so drunk we had no problem powering through it. We waded out against the crashing waves until our feet weren't touching the grounds. Tyler wanted to keep going, but the girls stopped because they were a lot shorter than us and were already treading water for a while. So, of course, most of the guys stayed with them. Tyler, on the other hand, hadn't been hitting on any of them and was basically in his own world. Sometimes had me involved in it, so he pressed on. Breaking out into a full-on swim, I chased after him, trying to keep in my line of sight, but unfortunately, the waves were really high. Even though they weren't breaking on us anymore, I started to feel sick from the motion, like I might throw up all my drinks straight into the ocean. That, and I was getting cold and tired eventually. I stopped and treated water, couldn't see Tyler anymore. I called his name, but there was no response, not a shop back, not even splashing. Swam out a little further and I called his name again as loud as I could, but still just silence. My heart started pounding, and I felt my throat closing up. I don't even know if it was the cold or just being scared of losing my friend, but it was probably a combination of both. I kept calling his name for a while, until I eventually started to feel exhausted from treading water. Eventually, I heard the rest of my friends calling out to us to come back. I was surprised how quiet they sounded, as I hadn't realized how far we swam out. Reluctantly, knowing I didn't have much energy left, I turned back and swam, heard the sound of their voices until I could stand again. I was hoping beyond hope that Tyler was with them in the darkness. I couldn't make out much detail, but I could tell they had all gotten cold or bored and were standing on the beach waiting for us. As I dragged myself up to them completely drained, my heart sank when I counted one less person than there should have been. "Where's Tyler?" I asked him right away. There was a short pause, and they all looked at each other with concern, then said they thought he was with me in the last day of hope. I thought maybe he had gotten around all of us and was the first to get back to the pile of clothes and get dressed. We all ran over there and picked out our clothes, putting them on, and seeing to our horror that Tyler's trunks were still there. I ran back to the ocean, but my friend stopped me from going back in, saying it was better to wait for him to come back. We shined lights out into the abyss and called his name 100 times, but we couldn't see or hear a damn thing, not a single sign of him. After about 20 or 30 minutes, one of us had to make the call to 911. We were a petrified, shivering, a sloppy mess. All of us. The cops asked us questions but didn't suspect foul play. They said they would have to wait until daybreak to send a search party out into the water, but it never got to that point. While we were all standing there, Tyler's body washed ashore. This happened during spring break of 2019 when I was in college. I'm a female. I was going to go on a spring break trip with my friend Sammy. We were going to Southern California for 5 days. This was only my second time going to California, and my first time since I was 8. So I was really excited. Sammy had been there the previous summer, and had been telling me about how cool it was. We had booked a hotel long in advance, and after we flew there, we got a lift from the airport to the hotel. It was the afternoon when we got there, and our plan was to check into the hotel and then go to the beach. We checked into our room, which was pretty standard, and then left the hotel. We went to the beach, which was quite busy. It was a really popular destination for people to go, and the weather was amazing like it usually is there. Sammy and I hung out around the beach for a while. It was very relaxing, and after a few hours, it started to get dark out and we headed back to the hotel. Sammy and I got back to the hotel. We were in the room for no more than 5 minutes. When there was a knocking on the door, you said that I would get it. I got up, walked over, and opened the door as Sammy stayed back, sitting on her bed, looking at her phone. I opened up the door, but just a few inches, and I still had the chain lock on it. I saw a man standing there. He was tall and thin, with brown hair, a slight beard, and was wearing a blue t-shirt and jeans. He said hi to me and then told me that he was sorry to bother me, but he had stayed in this exact hotel room the previous night, and it checked out that morning. He told me that he thought he had lost something and was sure that he forgot it inside a room, asked if he could come in and look around for a second. Just then Sammy shouted my name. I looked back at her, and she asked if she could show me something. I told the man, a moment, please. And I walked over to Sammy. She was at the far end of the room when I reached her. She whispered in my ear to not let the man in. She told me whatever. I do not let him in. I walked back to the door, slightly smiling to look friendly. I asked the man what it was, exactly that he had lost, and maybe we could paint it for him. The man interrupted me and asked if he could just come inside and look. He said he thought he knew where it was and that it would only take a minute or two. I told the man no and then shut the door. In his face as I shut the door, he attempted to stop the door from closing, but was unsuccessful. I then locked the other lock and asked Sammy who the guy was. Sammy told me that she had seen that man at the beach staring at her, and he seemed to kind of be following her. She wasn't 100 sure, but now that she was seeing him here, she knew he was probably just trying to get inside the room. I felt really creeped out when I heard this. I walked over to the door and looked out at the people. The man was still standing there. I showed Sammy, and we both decided to call the front desk. After speaking with them, they told us they would have the man leave. And thankfully he did. We found out he had not stayed in the hotel the previous night either. This is the story of my spring break vacation I was in college and we had an entire week off from classes for spring breaks. So me and my two friends, Daniel and Joey, decided to take a road trip to Nashville, Tennessee. The first parts of the drive went really well. All three of us had sort of old cars, but we decided to take my car because I was the only one with an SUV and had the most space. My car was relatively old. But for the first day of the trip, it ran great. But on the second day, when we had made it into Tennessee, we started driving through the mountains, and my car started acting up. I heard my engine making some pretty weird sounds. We had plenty of gas, but the car seemed as if it was going to die. The unfortunate part was that it was nighttime. And now the roads were getting really quiet. We also didn't get a very good signal up here at all. My car did eventually die, and we came to a stop on the side of the road. We were still about 2 hours away from our hotel. He tried starting the car back up, but had no luck in it. Our first thought was to get out our phones and look to see how far we were from the nearest gas station or store, then see if we could call for help. Unfortunately, none of us could get a decent signal. We looked at our surroundings, which were mostly woods around us, and an occasional car which drove by. The road was also really narrow. I was hoping maybe my car would start up again after a while, so we sat there waiting to start it again, and as we did, we talked about what we should do. We were debating our options when a car came slowly driving down the street and then stopped on the side of the road in front of us. The car was an older, weird-looking van. When it came to a stop, the driver got out and seemed even creepier than thieving. He drove, he had long hair, and he wore a hat. He was also wearing sunglasses and had older clothes on, and was smoking a cigarette in his mouth. Approached us and told us he would like to give us a ride. I told him we didn't need a ride and we were just waiting for our roadside service. The man laughed in a really creepy way and then told us it would be better if we got a ride from him. He then told us how he drove these mountains every day and he knew them like the back of his hand. We told him we would be fine, but thanks anyway. She then started laughing again and slowly walked back to his van and got inside then. He drove away really slow. We were all glad to see him leave because he really gave us the creeps. We sat in the car and kept trying to get signals on our phone. Sometimes we would have one bar and it would sort of work, but then it would cut out from having signal about 5 minutes later. We were all in the car when we noticed the van slowly coming back around the corner. It was driving at an extremely slow pace. The van was now coming back from the direction it had left, and we saw that the man's driver's window was rolled down and he had his head sticking out the window. Now I heard Daniel say, "Oh no, he's back." The man was driving literally 5 miles per hour, and as he got slowly closer to us, Joey asked what the man was holding. I looked over and saw that the man had what appeared to be a gun in his hand. We all started to freak out knowing he was driving towards us, and we all feared the worst. I took the keys and desperately tried to start my car one more time, to my surprise. Luckily, the car started up just as the man had gotten his van about 50 feet from us. From there, I put the car into drive and slammed my foot on the gas, and we sped down the road. As we passed the man in his van, we heard him yell something. The man looked to try to make a U-turn on the road, but was unable to make it. Without having to back up due to the narrow roads, I sped away as fast as I could and took the very first exit. We stopped at the first gas station we were able to find, and luckily the man didn't follow us there. I don't think he knew which direction we went. I was able to get some help from my care and fix it, and then we continued our drive and made it safely to our hotel. The rest of the trip went fine, and my car never broke down again.